Hello and welcome to our Lenten webinar retreat for day 28. And there are several themes for this broadcast. The first being Christ sets us free. And we look at the story of Lazarus, and it's rich in meaning for you and for me, especially during this time of Lent. At the tomb of Lazarus, Jesus groaned in spirit. Jesus' trouble here is the result of his identification with sinful humanity. He goes all the way to the bottom of it, letting its truth affect him. Jesus does not love us abstractly or from a distance. He comes close to us. He joins us in our suffering. More to the point, this groaning of Jesus signals the pain that God feels at our imprisonment to fear, low self-worth, low self-esteem. If his glory is being fully alive for us, then his agony is tied to our sin. How salvific it can be to listen to this groaning of the Lord at our time and our own lack of life. In the same vein, Jesus weeps for his friend Lazarus. There is something heartbreaking about this, for it is the only time in the scriptures that Jesus is described as weeping. Whatever form death takes within us, physical, psychological, spiritual, emotional, it is something deeply troubling to God. Reflect on that. One detail is particularly moving. Jesus asks, "Where have you laid him?" Sin alienates us from our God, making us strangers to him, just as in the book of Genesis. God looked for Adam and Eve, who were hiding from him. So here God incarnates, doesn't know where his friend Lazarus is. Then the Lord comes to the tomb. We hear that it was a cave with a stone laid across it. And when things are dead, we bury them away, we hide them. It's human nature. When we feel spiritually dead, we lock ourselves up in the darkness of our own anxiety and egoism and fear. But there is a power, a divine power, sent into this world whose very purpose is to break through all such stones. And you hear the words of Jesus, "Lazarus, come out." Are there any words more beautiful and stirring in the New Testament? From whatever grave you or I are lying in, Jesus calls us out now. He calls us out to be free. To be free of that egoic self, that rotten, shameful part of us that so often we allow dictate to us, and it alienates us from love, God's love. And the dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. Lazarus comes out with all of the signs of death still clinging to him. And so Jesus says, "Untie him and let him go." Here we see it. Whatever limits, binds, controls, orders, or dominates us, these are the enemies of God. These are the enemies of God. And another reflection is from Kathy Galloway, who's a minister of the Church of Scotland. And she says, what are the lessons from Peter? We've heard about Lazarus, so let's read. Jesus wanted his followers to be seekers, the teachers to be learners also, not people who had all the answers, who had doled out enlightenment like commodity brokers, but people who were aware of their own need to seek truth, who would continue to question until the day they died. In Peter's blindness lay the seeds of his sight. And what about the simple fisherman, universal in religious language, untutored in the subtleties of theology? Fishing was in his blood. It was his vocation. In trouble, his instinct was not to pray or organize, but to go fishing. But Jesus didn't seem to want a priest or a theologian. He wanted a fisherman. And when Peter was first rushed to Jesus by his brother Andrew on the shores of Lake Galilee, he didn't know that he had taken a long road that would lead to Jerusalem and then to Rome. But it was the fisherman who was needed on that road when the priests and the theologians lost their way. It was the language of bread and fish and water and catches that spoke to the hearts of men and women, not the pieties of the religious. And it was the ordinary man, trunched with the cares and responsibilities that are the lot of most of us, who took his wife and his life with him, who affirmed the life of faith as a possibility for all people burdened by life, not just as something for those set aside and apart. He had no refuge in religious formulae, no retreat into holier-than-thou posturing, only his given self, following Jesus wherever that road led. There are many forms of ministry, and we are all called to walk in different ways, but all of us are called as the people we are, not to some received picture of ministry. I find one of the most reassuring things about Peter is that he continued to be himself, impetuous, misguided, often getting it wrong. Oh gosh, there's hope for me yet. We read about him, for example, later on arguing with Paul and being severely dressed down for it. This endears him to me greatly as someone who has many arguments with Paul. How comforting to know that Peter went on being himself, went on making mistakes, did not turn into some identikit model church leader. It is sometimes hard for us to make sense of how we experience God working in our lives. Sometimes there seems to be so little rhythm or reason in what we're doing that is tempting to try to make ourselves into what we think we ought to be, rather than discovering who we truly are. It is hard to believe that we, who are exactly the people needed, so inadequate do we feel. Well, Peter felt like that, and Moses and Samuel, and so even did Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. We are never alone in our fears. But like Peter, perhaps we can learn that our love, however feeble, however flawed it seems, will be used, will matter if we don't give up on it. And it will be imperfect love, not the ideal love of our illusion, that will enable us to walk on water. And for further information, you can read from Scripture, St. Matthew's Gospel 14, verses 22 to 33. Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus, and the rest is there, and it's good reading. But she leaves us with a beautiful Celtic prayer. Lord, help me now to unclutter my life, to organize myself in the direction of simplicity. Lord, teach me to listen to my heart. Teach me to welcome change instead of fearing it. Lord, I give you these stirrings inside me. I give you my discontent. I give you my restlessness. I give you my doubt. I give you my despair. I give you all the longings I hold inside. Help me to listen to these signs of change, of growth, to listen seriously and follow where they lead, to the breathtaking empty space of an open door. That's what it's all about, isn't it? To the breathtaking empty space of an open door. Wow. So let's reflect. What was saying to your heart there about Peter? Well, Jesus gave him the keys of the kingdom. He appointed him leader, the first pope, knowing that he denied him 3 times. That must surely give you hope. Well, it gives me hope. And that's the beauty of Lent. It's understanding who we are. It's accepting ourselves for who we are. But more importantly for me, it's having the courage and the humility to say, Lord, I've messed up big time. Or a modern phrase is, I've cocked up big time. Not one I like to use, but I fall down so many times. And the habit doesn't protect me. In fact, I think it makes me more vulnerable. And when we mistake ourselves, when we fall by the wayside, we have a perfect role model in Peter and in Jesus to dust ourselves down, get back up again, and try again. Enjoy Lent. Enjoy the positive side of Lent, because not only did Jesus suffer and paid the price for our sinfulness, but he rose on the 3rd day. We have something to look forward to. Let us arise together in our spirit. Let us now celebrate our humanity and embrace ourselves as a broken child of God who is given healing on tap from Jesus.